Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'll kick off the regular council meeting for Monday, the 27th of January to order. First of all, I'd just like to respectfully acknowledge that we're gathered here on the ancestral territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people of the Songhees and Songhees nations who have stewarded these lands since time immemorial. Item 2, approval of agenda. I have a slight change here. And we don't have a precedence for this. We don't have this covered off in our own procedures. But was a notice of motion today. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to append it to the agenda, but only on approval of council. Normally, if you want same day consideration, that's what the notice of motion can be. We just haven't established the ground rules for that yet. So there is no precedence here. So I am going to change the agenda item to add 8.4, which is a motion by Councillor Olson. I considered it, and it's something that we can deal with relatively quickly here. So I'm going to move it to item 8.4. And on that note, may I have a mover and seconder to adopt today's agenda as amended? Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Grove and Councillor Jantzen. Any opposed? Seeing none, I shall move on. Motion carries. Release of in-camera resolutions, item number 3. There's 4 in-camera council resolutions that have been released from the in-camera classification on January 13th, and they are provided in the agenda. Item 4, Mayor's message. I just have a couple things here. First of all, I would like to welcome Heather Power, who's our new Deputy Corporate Officer. Heather, if you could just stand up so everybody knows who you are. And welcome, Heather. Second item, Be Still in My Heart exhibition. The Colwood Arts and Council Society has that exhibition ongoing right now, and they've opened their new gift shop, which is open all year round, from my understanding. What's 60 artists are in the gift shop, and 45 artists are showing at the exhibition right now. So thank you very much, and we'll get to you in a second. And lastly, Councillor Jantzen has a very quick update for West Shore Parks and Rec, and I'll turn it over to you, Councillor Jantzen.
Thank you, Worship. We had a recent meeting. The highlights are, first, we held our own board elections, and the member from Langford, Councillor Guy Ree, is the current chair for the next year. We had a proposal from a beach volleyball group to build some beach volleyball courts on site. It's a private group that would undertake the construction and the cost of it. The board had some questions, so we asked for a report to come back on how that would fit into the facility, given that we just decommissioned 2 beach volleyball courts in favor of the pickleball. A great presentation by the aquatics staff, who pool demand, as you might imagine, is a chronic issue for the board and for our communities. And they've been challenged to be innovative with the delivery of services, and they've come up with some ideas. A suite of them, including odd hour openings as far as late into the evenings and early mornings and what have you. So they're going to report back soon enough with some ideas. It'll be for the summer months, spring and summer months. Master plan, the Parks and Rec master plan that's ongoing for the West Shore. Much discussion was had, and in fact the board is awaiting to be interviewed themselves, as well as the facility staff. And that will help us make some key decisions for the future once that's delivered, and a tight time frame on that, like this year, like even by I think the spring or the summer of this year, it's going to begin to come back to us with recommendations. The pickleball courts, we applied for a gaming grant, BC gaming grant. For some reason, they found that we were not worthy of a grant. So our staff are going to follow up on how we can resubmit or do a better job or what have you for the next time around. But the money is in the budget for this project to the tune of roughly, I believe, $200,000 to $300,000 off the top of my head. And those 6 courts are going to go ahead and be delivered by the spring. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you very much. Oops, thank you very much. Councillor Day.
Yeah, just a quick question. In your update, Councillor Jantzen, you mentioned the application for beach volleyball courts. Was that a go-ahead or just a presentation?
Councillor Jantzen.
Sorry, we asked for our staff to report back on how it would fit into the facility, as well as the, with a private entity being involved, there's always the issue of access and access for the member communities and how that fits in. So there's a few questions. So we asked for a report from our staff in a timely manner because they wanted to get going, for this summer. So yet to be determined.
Great. Yeah, just of all the amenities I've seen on Vancouver Island, the beach volleyball courts seem to be the least well used. There's a couple of prominent ones in the Courtney area where I often visit, and I never see anybody playing there. So I just know that we're tight on space.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to item 5, adoption and receipt of the minutes. May I have a mover and seconder for the adoption of the council minutes from January 13th and receipt of the Planning and Land Use Committee minutes from December 2nd. Olson and Grove. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, call the question. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. And we'll move on to item 6, which is public participation. There was one written submission that was received after publication of the agenda, and that will be appended to the agenda tomorrow. No members of the public have registered to speak virtually. And at this point in time, I will open the floor to any members in the public that wish to speak. I just want to remind the public that comments pertaining to the following matters that have been subject to a public hearing are prohibited at this meeting. That's bylaw number 1700-13, Colwood OCP number 1700, 2018 amendment number 13. That's the 3698 Machosen Road at City Lands. And bylaw number 2036, Colwood Land Use Bylaw number 151, 1989, amendment number 215. That's 3698 Machosen Road. At this point in time, I will open the mic to the public. Anyone wishes to speak? We're all staring at you. No pressure. Okay, going once, going twice, gone. So we'll move on to item 7, which is delegations. And we have the pleasure of having Kathleen Schmalz, president of Arts and Culture Colwood Society, to do a presentation. Over to you, Kathleen.
All right. Good evening, Mayor Kobayashi and council. Oh, my voice is so loud. Is it too loud? No? Okay. I have a big voice. Okay. And staff and citizens, I wanted to give you an update on Arts and Culture Colwood Society because when I came in the fall, we were in rapid process of trying to regroup. And I wasn't able to really tell you too much about what was going on or what our plans were or where we would be at this point. And we were trying to figure out what the previous board had accomplished and envisioning certain aspects of the running of Arts and Culture Colwood Society because we knew that the way it was running was not to the liking of our fabulous supporters at City Hall, and also that we could do more. And as well as that, that it wasn't sustainable because of the amount of time that the past president had to put into the running of the organization to make it work. So we had to re-envision how it would work. And that took the month and a half that I had before I had my knee replaced on November 8th. And then luckily the volunteers were able to soldier on while I was gone, and they ran a really successful Gifts and Wishes Fine Crafts show. They took in $15,000 actually of money. Most of that doesn't come to Arts and Culture Colwood. Most of that goes back to the artists and artisans in the show. But it was really great to see. That's the first time that Arts and Culture Colwood has actually taken in money for the artists. In the past, people had to contact the artist and arrange a sale privately through the artist. So it was a big leap for us to have all our treasurer and everyone else organized to do that for the artists in the community. All right, so some changes and what we're up to in 2025. So we've changed our hours. We've gotten rid of Wednesdays and added Sundays, which I think will be a real help to the community. Lots of people want to come wandering around on Sunday, and now we're open from 11 to 3, and in the spring and on, it'll be 12 to 4 from Thursday to Sunday. And you'll see our new hire, Sunny Ba, has created some really beautiful hand-painted signs that you'll see out on the road. And we have been given permission to keep those out until we have more permanent signs, which are on the way. Sandra Russell is helping with those. All right, so let's see what we've got here. Here's our new hire, Sunny Ba. She's just absolutely lovely and very, very intelligent. And she's helping me write a heritage grant right now for a really great festival. And I'll tell you about that in a couple of minutes. So we are having the open mic, and Farley and I talked about that in the fall when we were here. It will be starting in March when he gets back with his wife from their fabulous holiday. And it'll be every second and fourth Saturday. And you're all invited. We're really excited to see that happen. I think it's going to be really fun. So we are continuing to hang work at the Wandafuka Recreation Center. That's a free service to Wandafuka and also to the members. There's a roster of people that's non-juried situation. So we have everybody from beginners to really advanced painters that show there. We're continuing a tradition that started many years ago with Coast Collective and having the annual Bloom Show in the spring. This is an example of one of the 4 types of member shows that we have every year. We have a really low membership cost. We're keeping it at $20 a year to keep it really low barrier. And there's no barrier in terms of, you have to be a good artist to be a member. You don't have to be an artist at all. You just have to have an interest in the arts in some way to become a member. And 2 of our member shows a year, we take the first 60 entries, no matter what, absolute beginner or whatever. So we have one of those shows coming up, the next show. It's called Sneak Peek, New Perspectives for 2025. And we are going to have a photo bomb at that opening. We're hoping there might be a surprise guest, maybe one over there, that might pick one of the photos and give that person an award. So we're going to ask people to pick one of their photos that they've taken since January 1st, 2025, and just print it on plain paper. We're going to paper the whole office walls and everything with those, and then our surprise guest at our opening will pick one. We'll see if we can persuade a certain surprise guest to come. So, all right. So, all of our exhibitions, we try as much as we can to, is that 10 minutes? Oh, no, okay. I was gonna say, oh my gosh, that went by fast. Okay. In all of our exhibitions, we try to integrate the arts, and that's my background. I teach at UVic in the teacher ed program in art education, and my background is in integrated arts education. So I really like to try to put many of the arts, too much gesturing, put many of the arts together. And this current exhibition is an example of that. So in celebration of Arts and Culture Colwood's Poetry Station, we have an exhibition up now called Be Still My Heart. And it's artwork inspired by poetry of love and longing, juried by Angela Menzies, whose piece is up on the poster up there. This is typical of the type of exhibition that we're trying to put on, which integrates other art forms into the concept of the exhibition. We had some money from a gaming grant, and we had an absolutely fantastic music group called Steluta that came. You can ask Councillor Grove about it. It was pretty fun. So, all right, so in our non-member exhibitions, we try to find exhibitions that will really inspire the community and also inspire the artists to understand what art is in a different way. And one of the upcoming exhibitions is by Ainsley Dack and Bill Porter, a local Langford gentleman, and Kathy Key, whose work is the face with the kind of florals on it. Her work is huge. You might have seen it in Souk Fine Arts if you go to Souk Fine Arts, but very, very different kind of work that I think younger people will really like. Both of these are muralists, these painters. So here's another example of an exhibition that we're trying to expand people's thinking about what art is. Skye Weir is from Calgary, and her work is fabric that she prints 4 feet by 40 feet long pieces of fabric, and she silk screen prints them on both sides. And then she scrunches them up and hangs them up on the wall in these big clumps of color. And while her show is on, we're hoping to have a drag show. And we have an actual drag artist who is planning to organize the show because we're not, we want a real drag show. So, and we're talking to Sandra Russell a little bit about anything extra we have to think about to, in this day and age, I guess. A year ago, I wouldn't even have given that a second thought, but, whether do we have to have a bouncer or, anyway, we're going to do this, whatever. So it's going to be great. So, all right, the opening of our year-round gift shop, I mentioned already, we have 60 artists and artisans, and we do a turnover every 6 months. So there'll be new people coming in July for the gift shop, and then we keep refilling things all the time in between. So it's constantly changing. Really, really happy to be having a great collaboration with Sandra Russell. She and John Russell, and I saw John there. My goodness, like they're a gift. So thank you for them. I was working with Sandra today. She's going to be doing some of the music in the parks at Arts and Culture Colwood's building at 170 Goldfinch. And we're also working together on the festival that I mentioned before. So I'll talk to you about that a little bit more. We're trying to make sure we leave space for some of the other volunteer groups like Reimagine. And Reimagine are going to do a workshop. Sometimes our space isn't the right space for them, but they're doing a citizen science workshop. So we're offering them the space for free. So that they can do that workshop because our place is perfect for that with the lagoon right there. Okay, so We also are going to have a functional pottery show in October, working with the Wandafuka Rec Center staff. And we are going to do some kind of a food bank fundraiser in association with that. So if you have any ideas of a worthy group that we should make our donation to, I'd love to hear, because we haven't decided on that yet. But I think rather than a soup bowl fundraiser, which is the usual one, I think we'll do a dessert plate. And then people will buy the plate and the dessert. Should be really fun. So that's in October. And again, in November and December, we'll transform our space into a fine crafts market. And all right, so the Insight Festival has been reimagined to be on site. And we are going to call it the Lagoon Arts and Culture Festival. It's going to be September 13th. And I've been working really closely with Sandra to create this festival. It's going to be super fun. We're going to use the inside and the outside around our building. We decided on a one-day festival that's just going to be jam-packed with really fun things for the whole family. So I can tell you a bit more about that soon. We're writing the grant for Heritage Canada right now, so it's kind of all coming together. Okay, and we're working hard to become an arts hub. And I believe this is more in keeping with the hopes that the city had for that building. And I think it's also just going to be rich and fun and lovely. There are some constraints that we have. There's no changing rooms. There's no, risers for choirs, or, there's many things we can't do, but there are many things that we will figure out that we can do. And I think the beginning thing is to have the open mic there. Another thing we have in the back of our mind, it's not as ready as the open mic, but it's some kind of a poetry slam night or an author's reading night or something like that. So we're working, always interested in your ideas. So my email is president@Arts and Culture Colwood. So email me anytime. Happy to hear from you. And we have a full calendar of offerings. Last year, because I guess it was just their very beginnings, the board had big spaces between the shows, and there will be no spaces between the shows this year. So it'll be just show after show after show. So anytime somebody comes down on a Thursday to a Sunday, there's always going to be things that they can see, and they're always welcome to come in. I put the calendar up on the website, or I handed it to our guy that does the website, and I handed him the wrong calendar. So if you go in there, you're going to see a few little miscues that I will fix in the next couple of days. But we will have our calendar up on the website so people can see what is happening. And I just want to thank you so much for your support for all of the arts through this venture. It's unbelievable. I mean, I've been in a lot of situations in a lot of provinces, and I have never seen this kind of support. So thank you so much from everybody in the arts in the Colwood area, and to tell you the truth, like the greater Victoria area, because for visual artists in particular, there are getting to be less and less venues where they can show their work and share their work with others. So thank you so much for all of your support. I want to give you a hand. So are there any questions for me?
Yeah, I'll open up the floor for questions. Okay. Councillor Ward.
Not a question really. I just wanted to thank you for the comprehensive report. I think it's pretty exciting. I heard from a few folks in the community about the gift shop opening just the other day that we're going to pop down and look at some things. So I think it's a really welcome addition down there, and looking forward to see what's coming, and looking forward to, I got $100 if the mayor will get on open mic and sing something. So we'll see how it goes, but thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. It's my pleasure. We had 200 people at the opening of the show and the gift shop. And it was a happening opening. It was really, really fun. So I think we're on our way. So, yeah, thanks.
Yes, I want to add to that. I just want to thank you because, you know, everyone has to understand in the public that you're a bunch of great volunteers and you're doing this as volunteers. And talk about building communities. You are community builders. And I'd like to thank you. I mean, it's, you know, double back. You know, we've enabled it, but what you're doing is just wonderful. And the energy, and I've just heard all the feedback right now, the energy that has been re-injected into this right now is pretty phenomenal. So you've got to take a couple attaboys or attagirls and phenomenal. Thank you so much. I do have two questions though.
Okay.
The first one is just the Insight Festival. So is Fort Rod Hill not part of this picture anymore? Because I remember they made a big thing out of this, and I was wondering if we're gonna anger them by doing it in another place.
I don't know that answer to that question, and I will get in touch with them. All
Okay.
right. I think as a board, we are trying to be aware of our limitations and our abilities. And last year after, while the board was falling apart, but part of the reason the board was falling apart after the Insight Festival was because the board members were carrying tables and putting up chairs and running children's tents, and there wasn't the right capacity for that situation. And a couple of people still are sick from that, from stress. So we decided that we're going to bring it all back home and we're just going to do it there. And that way we can handle it. It's something we know we can handle. So I thank you for that suggestion, and I will speak to the people at Fort Rod Hill.
Okay.
And if they want to be involved in any way, they are very welcome to be.
Yeah, it's just traditionally that we did it with them, and I was just wondering if they just would go away or if they were, yeah, so no, so thank you very much for
Yeah,
answering my
I'll
question.
get in touch. And was there another question?
Yes, the second question I have, so just to help the society itself, it- have you ever talked about putting an admission for some of these things, like small, like a loony or toonie sort of thing, right? I mean, I'll give a bunch of them out to people to go to these things. It's just another way of creating some revenue for you.
Well,
folks.
I think if we aren't successful in our Heritage Canada grant, well, we may have to think about something like that.
Mhm.
But we are writing right in the grant that it's free. And I think we would like to keep it to be free because we've found ways, we're charging our members a bit for entering work in shows now. And so I think we're going to be able to be sustainable through things like that. But that's a good thing to keep in the back of my mind. I like the idea of it being free.
Yeah, me
if
too.
we can,
Yeah,
right?
I absolutely agree because there's nothing you can go to that's free. You know, music in the park is a great thing that we have continued to support, and through sponsors, you know, we've kept that free. But
Yeah.
it's just that you know, always have a plan A, B, C sort of thing.
Yes,
So
yeah. Well, we've decided that like for the open mic, when they're inside, everybody will pay $5, drop in the bucket. But when they're outside on the deck, it's free. So we're trying to make that as free as possible. But yeah. Any other questions or?
Thank you very much
Yeah,
again, Kathleen.
thanks so
Great.
much.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to item 8, which is new business. First item and up in order is Councillor Ward and the strategic parking review. And I will hand it over to you, Councillor Ward, to add context and to motivate, please. Thank you. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The motion as it's worded is actually a little more restrictive than what I intended. In discussion with the former CAO, there was some insight that there was a greater report being compiled on parking issues in Colwood. And so in absence of that, not knowing if that's the case, see Byron nodding, I don't know if it's true or not. So what I'm looking to do is actually have this component around provincial housing regulations and impact on parking, just as part of a larger parking review. So if a parking review like that isn't taking place, then I would amend the motion to add that I'd be seeking a larger report there. But anyway, I'll float that out there for the moment, and maybe we can have staff confirm at some point whether or not that's actually the case. But in terms of the motivation for what I'm looking for here, bear with me here, it's a little wordy. So part of the regulatory changes embedded in Bill 47, as we know, is that residential parking minimums will be removed from the transit-oriented development or TOD designated areas. And in Colwood, we know that's limited to the gateway area. So while these existing parking bylaws governing minimum parking levels will be rendered inapplicable, Colwood will still be able to require commercial parking, some accessible parking for people with disabilities. But generally speaking, the number of general parking lots or general parking spots in new residential will be determined by what the market determines it needs. Whereas the cynic in me suggests what the developer really decides is feasible, cost effective, or what they want to add, not regulatory minimums. So the effect of this is that it will significantly reduce the cost of developing high density residential in that transit oriented area. And that's largely aligned with the city's climate action plans and provincial clean BC transportation goals. But, you know, even in relation to that, it's unclear what this means to goals for off-street EV charging, for example, what it will do to increase the need for already overprescribed public EV charging. And what will, and further, this will exacerbate pressure for on-street parking and increase conflict in the developing gateway community and existing neighbors around precious curbside space. And that's something we saw already with Colwood Corners. So allowing the market to dictate parking needs tends to assume that the developer goals are aligned with people versus simply cost effective, and that people make rational choices, such as only owning the number of cars for which they have parking for. But experience here in Colwood and elsewhere indicates that this is not what we should expect. And further, the market relies on pricing signals, and the pushback that we got from the city and Ani Developments felt for pay parking suggests people in Colwood aren't enamored with market solutions when they're used to getting something that they've always had for free and perceive should be free. So finally with that, the TOD assumes that there will be effective transit service as well at the TOD area to move people around the West Shore to downtown and to points beyond. That assumption will be tested in the years ahead, and it's largely predicated on significant growth in funding, route effectiveness and frequency and ridership, none of which are assured where we are. We are not Burnaby on a SkyTrain station. We're the fledgling West Shore here. So my concern really is that the potential exists for the city to effectively subsidize vehicle owners and their on-street parking in proximity to TOD developments, where a developer can cite market conditions, climate goals, and other reasons and elect to build no parking. I mean, they can build a smaller amount of parking, but they can choose to build none at all. So what I'm looking here, I'm seeking to mitigate that potentially by having staff report on the feasibility of updated strategies for on-street parking in Colwood, including introducing a TOD bylaw or city bylaw that would create time-limited on-street parking in the TOD, so that those that choose to live in the TOD respect the intention of the designation. So in layperson's terms, it's clear if you buy into a condo or rent a condo that doesn't have parking and you have a car, the city doesn't have an obligation to provide you with a parking spot. It's not a taxpayer subsidy that you get. When I speak more holistically about a larger parking review and something that I'm actually looking for here is that I would also suggest that we, any report here also examines the current abuse of off-street or on-street parking, by those with accessory dwelling units. We know we have bylaws where people are supposed to have themselves and their tenants parked on their property. And we also know that that isn't the case in a lot of scenarios. We may need to review the current status of and future implementation of residential parking requirements for a variety of reasons, including addressing homes that exceed the bylaw governed capacity of their on-street parking, as well, or off-street parking, as well as time limitations to ensure free and open access to the street for all residents. There's some other issues that I think merit inclusion in here, like the current ability to park a derelict but licensed vehicle on the street without limit. I know that's a case that's occurred in Royal Bay. Vehicle with a flat tire, covered in layers of dust, parked for months on end because it's insured. And well, the city again is now subsidizing somebody's de facto extra driveway. So a lot of issues like that, inconsistency in terms of where residential parking is currently allowed or restricted, where it's not, what enforcement or lack thereof there is there. Suffice to say, I think we're due for a thorough review of our parking regulations, consistency, enforceability, and to identify and address our future needs as our city continues to grow. Kept it short.
Thanks very much, Council Ward. So do you have a specific motion that, or is it, or perhaps I'll turn it over to the CAO right now. Maybe you can introduce the person that can answer this question right now. Perhaps.
Thank you, Mayor Kobayashi. Byron Grant, our manager of bylaw and building, will come forward and talk about the parking review.
Good evening, Council. Yeah, so on October 28th of last year, we brought a draft policy and procedure for on-street parking management, and it would be a start. So it would be, ways we're able to determine areas that benefit from time-limited parking, residential only parking. And part of that discussion would definitely be, influences from larger developments and how to establish those areas. And to your other point, also getting feedback from the public on our traffic and highways bylaw, because if you have a vehicle registered to your address, you can park indefinitely. So yeah, that's definitely something we're wanting to get feedback from the public on, as well as most places are 72 hours. Doesn't necessarily mean we go around marking tires at 72 hours, but if we see that bylaw being abused, then that's where we could use that tool. So as of now, October 28th, Council voted unanimously for us to take our draft policy procedure and amendment to the traffic and highway bylaw for public input, and then we'll bring that report back, have more of a discussion, likely I'd say by Q2.
Thanks very much, Council Ward. Just to follow on that. Oops.
So then just in terms of the motion, then I'd be seeking to incorporate, adding, the other components seem to be addressed already. Thank you, Byron. Appreciate that. I think I'd be seeking to incorporate a Bill 47 specific review and how it relates to the TOD. I see Jason's got a hand there, so let me speak to that.
Yeah, and this really isn't unlike what the provincial government has done in other planning instances where you have entitlements that go along with a development. For instance, anytime there's development adjacent to an ALR property, what the ALR will often require is a covenant on that property to say that ALR operations are happening directly adjacent to your property. When you're purchasing this, you're aware as a homeowner that that covenant is attached to the title, that parking, we could extend this to parking to say, because of provincial legislation, parking requirements, you're not entitled to a spot in front of the place based on what provincial regulations are. So what we'd look at is, what are our tools to determine that with parking? How do we move that forward with Bill 47? And we've had a letter from the minister very recently on Bill 44, 45, and 47. So this will be coming back to council for further consideration, and we can add that to this parking review.
Oops, sorry about that. Someone keeps shutting off my mic. Is that you? Okay, thanks. Councillor Day.
Thank you. So I think it's going to be difficult for the public to obviously separate out the different areas of concern. They're going to come forward with the issues that they're most aware of. But I think it's worthy of noting, we did receive one letter about this, and there's many ways of looking at it, but the impacts of all of that housing legislative changes is resulting in increased dwellings, because that's the whole point of the legislation, is to provide more homes. But we're providing them sometimes in older neighborhoods, so suites and ADUs are definitely in the mix, and those are definitely an issue in terms of parking because the roads that we live on weren't designed to have parking for all of the people that live there. So we've been fairly progressive in creating the requirement to have a parking spot for your suite. But the next uh, implication of that is trying to make sure that our streets are free and clear for the safe access of emergency vehicles and other things as well. So I think that it's going to be a difficult one to get the right mix with, but I do feel that the status quo can't just be accepted because a lot of the old parking scenarios that exist are very unfriendly to cycling and pedestrian use on those roads. And the transit system that we have is unlikely to become sufficient on it in and of itself to really have a reasonable lifestyle using transit. And I've been a transit user and tried very hard to participate in transit, but there are many areas in the city that it simply takes too long to take transit to get there.
Thank you very much. Councillor Grove?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to, I may have missed it in your concise, brief statement earlier, but one element that I would like to speak to is just about the decoupling of rent, parking spots from rent. I believe at Colwood Corners, this was the initiation of the sort of the beginnings of the problem. So the residents would say, no, I don't have a car, don't need a car, save $100 a month on the parking spot and then use residential street parking. It seems to me there's enough spaces, they're just not being paid for because the developer decoupled the rent for the parking space from the main rent body. So I just wondered if that was included or how, I don't know how this would be included in the some sort of a bylaw, but or if we have control over such a thing at all. But it seems to me that was a key part of the problem at Colwood Corners. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll have an attempt to answer your question.
Okay.
And you're right. I mean, that was the problem with Colwood Corners. And then the parking fees that they stuck on because previous councils before us had agreed to decouple. And therefore, people were buying these places knowing that they could save $100 a month for parking. And the problem is that, then it became a street parking problem. And then once all those parking spots became available for the retailers there, then they started using them all. And people that were trying to use the retail stores couldn't get access to the retail stores. And they're the people that were paying for it. So that's how that all came to be. But in this case, it's a bit of a different issue because Bill 47, the way I interpret this, is pretty darn clear. Within 400 meters of a major transit exchange, which there's only one here in Colwood, and that's in front of Wandafuka Rec Center. And within 400 meters, there is no minimum. That's the only difference. There is no minimum. And it's not saying that I think that it would be suicidal for well, I guess not. It's happening right now in Victoria. But I think it'd be suicidal for any developer to develop something with no parking. I mean, who's he going to sell it to? He's just restricting his ability to sell or rent. So that's the difference here. So I think that's pretty cut and clear right now. But I think what's been said tonight, just a generic review, and I was promised Q2, late Q2, early Q2. Early, mid. Okay, so no, I like the dates now because we never do understand when we get that feedback, and somehow things get lost on the ether, and we next year we may see it. So it's great to have that commitment. Thanks very much, Byron. Oh, sorry, Councillor Ward. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to reiterate that the Bill 47 component that doesn't get lost in that greater discussion. We know the issues around coupling with developments where we have control, but the letter writer that wrote in, for example, completely missed my point, and I would disagree fundamentally what he said. You know, they're talking about appropriate, not excessive amount of parking. But who determines that? And I think, again, the situation is very different. A high-rise development of 35 stories in downtown Victoria or Vancouver, the developers may well have no problem selling that at all, frankly, with no parking. And it makes sense. I'm not disagreeing with the concept. If you're on a SkyTrain station, why build a parking stall? Have stalls for deliveries and accessible parking and so forth. But you probably can get away without it. What I'm trying to accomplish here is saying, okay, if that's what you truly believe, if market conditions dictate that you don't need parking because everyone's going to take transit, let's hold you to that then. And I mean the provincial government, and I mean the developers, and I mean the people that are buying into this project. If someone comes forward and says, City of Colwood, you cannot make me build a parking spot in my 25-story building, you know, on Ocean Boulevard and Souk Road. We cannot. We have no right to make them do that. But we do have a right to say, okay, but if half your building still chooses to drive a vehicle because transit out here isn't effective, we want to make sure that we aren't subsidizing your parking on the street at the expense of everyone else around. And, you know, I think this is where a one-size-fits-all solution, which these TOAs are from the provincial government, doesn't apply, at least not yet. And for the foreseeable future in areas like here and even Langford and elsewhere, where transit service, frankly, is subpar, and it will be for a long time. I mean, you can get a bus that will take you downtown. If you're a government worker and you work 8:30 to 4:30, the schedules are great, you can do it. If you're a student who needs to leave Royal Bay and transfer and get elsewhere, it's not great. Now, there can be people, shift workers, that live in that TOA that transit won't work for them or it won't be safe for them. So I think it's naive to think that you're going to build a 25, 30-story high rise there with not a single parking spot, and none of those people will have cars. So I believe we need to get out ahead of it, even decades ahead of it, and say that's fine. You know, you can have that, but if market conditions dictate that, we still control the street parking. City of Vancouver's done that, right? They have paid residential parking everywhere. It's, you know, is a reality. Some like it, some don't, but they control the on-street parking because that's taxpayer paid property. And why should we subsidize it for folks that in theory are going to take transit? So that's really the point here, is just that you want your cake, well, you can't eat it too.
Great, good point. Excellent point. So do you wish to make a motion then, Councillor Ward? Councillor Ward, go ahead.
I would just say, sorry, I would say that the motion as written, but forming a component of the parking study that's due to come forward in Q2 if the time and capacity permits. That latter part's not part of it, but I'm just looking at Byron to make sure the time is good.
Is that understood? Okay, thank you very much. A seconder on that motion. Okay, Councillor Grove. Further discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous, motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you. We'll move on to item 8.2. Councillor Jantzen has a motion, speed traffic mitigation on Cecil Blogg Drive. And if you could motivate Councillor Jantzen, please.
Thank you, Worship. Firstly, the motion recommendation that staff explore opportunities to mitigate increased traffic and speeding on Cecil Blogg Drive on the stretch from Souk Road through to Jacqueline Road, and that all options be considered, from signage changes up to and including potential restrictions of westbound traffic on Cecil Blogg Drive. In essence, it's some folks that live in that stretch have reached out to me, and the reality is I went and visited a couple of times, and I've deliberately taken that route, and there are some pressures. It is a cut through for traffic that might be getting backed up onto Souk Road to dive off onto Cecil Blogg Drive, across to Jacqueline, left turn Jacqueline, then right turn Walfred, and then that empties out onto Happy Valley directly. So it is kind of a natural cut through. And as we know, people will look for alternatives as traffic backs up. Our neighbors in Langford have done some work, a lot of work at the intersection at Happy Valley Road, and also some work at Jacqueline Road And with the increased volume or perhaps the cycling changes or the advanced turns or what have you, it's backing traffic up, which is causing some concerns for the residents on Cecil Blogg Drive. What I'm not asking for here is a report. We're looking for some action. I think that our staff have the bandwidth to address this situation for themselves, as we've had multiple opportunities to mitigate traffic in areas like this through the community. So I am asking that staff do take some action in a timely manner. I will leave the what and the where to our professional staff cadre, and I don't feel like I can really add anything with my arts degree. So I'll just refrain. But we are looking for something to address the concerns, whether it be volume, whether it be speed, or whether it be just driver behavior. We have a suite of options to help mitigate some of this. So that's what I'm asking. I do understand that, we are awaiting a fulsome review of the community with regard to what we're going to do. I prefer to not wait for that. I think this stretch does require some attention, as some other stretches have recently received some attention as well. Thank you, Your Worship. I'll yield.
And that's the motion. And can I just get a second before I open it up for discussion? Seconder, please. Okay, Councillor Grove is seconded. Now I'll open up for discussion. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I could support the motion, but not if no report's coming back. Because my issue is that traffic calming is some of the most divisive things that we do, and the solution that might be proposed needs to be advertised to the community so that they have an opportunity to comment or make it better. I just don't like going ahead and doing stuff without the community being informed what's being proposed. Because I think we need to, many heads are better than one. And we have the experience of what has or hasn't worked before, but it's the people who live there who know the situation best, and there could be unintended consequences. I mean, we may make it very difficult for some traffic movement or a way that people need to exit or enter their properties. So I just want to make sure that we follow the normal procedure and come back to council so that those who are engaged can give us the benefit of their experience.
Thanks very much. I'll come back to you on that. Councillor Olsen.
Thank you. I certainly don't disagree with Councillor Jantzen regarding the Cecil Blogg area, but I think that for me personally, like there's several other areas that we need to identify that are of a significant concern. And so I would be looking to staff for reporting back on, how are we prioritizing these areas? We're obviously monitoring, like we must be monitoring and intaking information, complaints that are coming in from certain areas of the neighborhood. I know that Marianne, which is close to Councillor Jantzen and myself, is also an area of concern. We know that speeding is an issue in all of Colwood, not just everywhere. It's an issue right now, but I think that I would be interested in seeing a report coming back that kind of includes all of the areas that are of concern and prioritizing them by, highest priority area to lowest, and then addressing it that way. So I would be seeking an amendment to that motion as well to include a report back with a specific timeline as to when we can expect it.
Thank you very much. I will circle back. Councillor Jordison.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I have the same sort of comments, is that I think that it needs to go through a proper process and report that sort of thing, just like the lagoon issue that I brought forward, and that was dealt with. It took many a moon to get that dealt with. So I think it just needs the proper lens put on it, and not just here and there. And it needs to be thought of altogether, and what's priority and that sort of thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll make a comment before I go back to you, Councillor Jantzen. So I'm in agreement that we have to determine, you know, if it is both, if it's both speeding and if it's traffic. I mean, right now, I've learned a valuable lesson where I thought what I was told by the citizens was the problem. And then we did the science behind it. We put the counters on. And we found out it's not so much traffic. It was speeding, in fact. So we were trying to solve the wrong problem. And it might be a combination of both. I don't know. But we have the technology. We have the counters. We can do the speed. We can do the reports. I don't know. It's pretty simple to me. And then let's solve the problem. But when you don't know what you're really trying to solve here, I guess that, and it doesn't take long to do this. Like, we could put these things up tomorrow, from what I understand, and we can do the counting. So I would love to see some type of something, you know, so that we can make the right decision. And you're right. In this particular case, I agree. I did see I saw 3 emails on complaining about Cecil Blogg. So it is a true issue. So I'm not going to deny that. But I also have a lot of other emails, to your point, Councillor Olson, where we've got problems all over the place. It's not specifically even Colwood, it's all over, period. And what is the highest priorities right now, I guess, is how we have to assess this. And let's try to fix as many as we can. And just to do this in isolation, I don't know, you know, maybe it's the right thing. I don't know, but you know, we do have problems in other places. To me, it's where, you know, human safety is the biggest issue to me right now. So that's how I see it, but that's just my comments. Councillor Jantzen, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. A couple of things. First off, I hear you at the table, and I don't disagree. But a couple of things come to mind. Firstly, one, I thought we had a motion out there talking about speeds across the community that we were waiting on a report. Perhaps staff can confirm that at some point. Second, I recall this committee making a decision down at Royal Bay on Latoria Road, absent a robust report coming to council. So I think to say that we're unable to take a decision at this table, I don't think is completely correct.
Yeah.
Having heard you all,
Councillor Jantzen, I will back you up on that, because I found that surprising. I'm driving down Latoria and I saw that new sign, and I went, oh, I guess we must have passed something here. So you're right. Yeah,
I'm not going to push back too hard, but we didn't wait 6 months for a report to circle back to change the speed zone there. This council took a decision.
Yeah.
If we're not in agreement with this decision, I'm fine to circle back and amend that. In fact, I heard Councillor Day suggest a particular amendment. I'm happy to accept that, which is a report. So if I can amend that, Marcy, how do you want to do that procedurally?
We can go friendly.
We could actually put forward a motion for an amendment to the main motion.
Thank you. And I do accept that, if it's good with the seconder. I forget who that was. Was that?
I can't remember.
Perfect. Thank
Councillor
you.
Day, Councillor Olson.
So report back, and I would like to attach a date to that. And I'm not sure what's reasonable. I'd love to hear from staff on a couple of those issues, whether we are awaiting a more fulsome report across the community and what a suitable date might be for return. Thank you.
Go ahead.
The motion as is, we'd write a report and bring that back to council with the timeline to put the metrics in place to figure out what the problem is. And then when we can bring the report forward, rather than council directing what that looks like, I'll talk to staff, and in that report, we'll have that timeline associated with it.
So I'm thinking 2 timelines here. One, I'd like to know when the report's going to come back, because sometimes these things disappear into the ether. And second, time frame for the works to be concluded. So, I mean, are we talking the same timeline?
Oh, Joshua Bayless,
Joshua.
our Deputy Director and Manager of Engineering, will answer that for us.
Perfect.
Thank you for the question through the mayor. I'm going to say that's twofold. So the phase 2 of the Latoria speed reduction, that report is being worked on right now. I'm going to say end of Q1, inside of Q2, we'll have that back, and that'll be the global community. Another initiative being worked on is the Vision Zero, which you saw during budget deliberations and service review. So that's a separate entity, but again, we'll couple a lot of these conversations around high impact zones, crash data, that type of stuff. So that's another angle this could take. The other one is our traffic calming policy, which we have put Cecil Blogg through already. But on top of that, you'll remember from budget deliberations, again, the $100,000 for, I think it was called like traffic safety initiatives or something like that. Inside of that, the intent is to have our decision matrix, which brings all calls for service, all issues brought up by the public. If you guys get a call, you can bring them back to us. We log that in the matrix. And then to Councillor Olson's point, it gets rated and there's a point system and then a weighting to those points. And then there will be a hierarchy of which projects through that decision matrix get raised up highest in terms of need. And then that would come back to either infrastructure committee, whichever other committee or council, depending on what council sees. And then those projects we'd put a budget associated with those from the $100,000. You guys would say, okay, go ahead and do that one, go ahead and do that one. That one, we're in the final stages with the matrix, but I'm nervous to commit to a date without first chatting with our CAO. But it is intended to be earlier this year. I think we worked on it hard late last year. I've gone through a few revisions already this year. It's looking really good. It's looking promising. We have, I want to say 25 to 30 projects already on the list just from calls for service and complaints we've seen from the community. Yeah, the decision points we're having are really strong and supported with documentation from our old TMP, the plan for the new TMP, the ATNP. So there's a lot of really good data behind the decisions we're looking to make and how we rank those projects.
Thank you. And that's great. So what kind of time frame to report, circle back on Cecil Blogg Drive is reasonable?
I think if I may through the chair, to our CAO's point, if we're separating Cecil Blogg out, I'd probably want a little bit of time to meet with our CAO to confirm to a timeline.
Right.
If we're considering it inside of the hierarchy of all of the, like what we're seeing in Colwood, that I think is going to be sometime in, not to steal Iron's thunder, but Q2.
Thank you. So I hear what you're saying. I'm quite frankly, I would rather see Cecil Blogg just dealt with, period. And that the other report, we can wait for that to land as it does. So I'm looking for some action on Cecil Blogg Drive. I don't want to see this get wrapped up into something much larger and bigger that ends up being a 2-year turnaround, tongue in cheek, of course, for these residents, your worship. So I do accept that amendment. And did you get everything you needed, Marcy, from the table?
I've just put it up in front of you. So if you wanted to review that, staff provide a report addressing speed and increased traffic within Colwood and report back to council. And I didn't know if you wanted a time frame.
Do we need to put a time frame on that, or yeah, I think I've made my point. We can just maybe,
They need to confer. Okay. I'll let them confer. I'll give to you in a second. Please, Mr. Johnson.
Hard to give a timeline when we're trying to achieve an objective, but we don't know exactly what it is, whether it's the speeding, what the improvement may be, how much that might cost. Do we have budget for it? This is the problem when we don't have that priority sequence, i.e. this is our number one area that we're addressing with $100,000 this year, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. What I'd recommend is this will come back to council no later than March with the update with how this all fits together with a timeline associated with it, which will allow me and Mr. Bayless to come up with a plan that makes sense. I understand the priority, but we also want to get that larger priority sequence because quite frankly, as soon as neighbors see that we're responding to this, everybody's going to say, well, I'm a priority too. And we need to have that sequence of events to make sure that we're addressing it logically. We can do this as an interim step as a priority sequence, and we can bring that report back to council by March.
Thank you. I think I've flogged this horse plenty, and I'll just leave it at that. And I appreciate the answer. I just hate to see this one stretch of roadway lost in favor of a much larger report that's more complicated and takes longer. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Dave.
Thank you. I was just going to suggest that I wasn't realizing when I made my amendment, I just want a report to come back to council before staff are taking action. But given that we're very close to a more global report, it is fair that it would be part of that global report. That does not mean that we can't do anything right now. Let's contact the RCMP and ask them to do some extra enforcement in the area, especially in February, to make a difference. That is something that we have done on Lagoon Road when residents were coming with concerns about speeding and problems in a couple of different areas. And it's something that they have responded to provide. Just having a police car in the area does help with the visual presence of the RCMP being there. And I know that it's not a total answer, but it's something in the meantime while we wait to make sure we make the right changes, because there's been plenty of criticism about some of the changes that we've made over time trying to address these sorts of issues. So we're trying to get it right and try to use our limited resources effectively.
Thank you. Any other comments? I'll just go for my second time. And it's not that I'm negative against this. I do agree with the staff on this particular case, because I guess I get flogged with all the complaints right now. And believe me, this is the biggest complaint, is speeding and traffic all throughout Colwood, believe me. I mean, and you can do this anecdotally. You can, when I walked around and was, during the election, you go knocking on the doors. I agree. Cecil Blogg is freaking dangerous. It really is. Speeding, to me, it was mainly speeding, but I wasn't there during business hours, so you don't know the traffic. But then again, I almost got hit twice going up Fulton. I mean, just as bad. And then there are some other areas in Colwood that are they're really, really bad. So, if I can wait till, if I heard sort of March maybe, or March in that time frame, I would like to see the big picture. It's just like how we did the sidewalks. When we were doing these in isolation, it was wrong. We weren't looking at the bigger picture. And when we came up with the criteria, where should the sidewalks go? When we came up with the criteria, it made sense to me. And we were able to look at the big laundry list and say, these are the first 8 areas we're going to hit. And it was done fairly. It's equity and fairness amongst all Colwood. And that's all I'm trying to, because I know right now, if we favor one area, then I'm not going to hear the end of it. Why is mine not as important? And without the criteria, and it was explained to me by Joshua, and there was another thing that I looked at, and he sort of explained some of the criteria, and I went, ooh, I never thought of that. That's not fair. He was right. So I would like that sort of same criteria being used on all these high traffic areas, these dangerous areas. And, and I can vouch it for it anecdotally, Cecil Blogg is a problem. It is a problem. So there's no doubt about it. But is it worse than Fulton? Is it worse than, over on Kelly? Is it worse? I don't know, like which one takes priority. And like we said, we have limited dollars, but I'm sure Cecil Blogg will be right up there. I'm super confident it will be. But just to isolate this now, I think we're sending the wrong message, in all fairness, to everyone throughout the city. But that's just my opinion. And that's why I can't support the motion as is. Anyways, on that note, I'll call, we didn't have a seconder on the amendment, did we? Was it Misty? Were you the seconder? Okay. Okay. So on the amendment, I think we rolled it all into one. Did we? Okay. No, I thought it's called amendment. Can you flesh it back up again, please? I'm pretty sure you had it as an amendment. Yeah, it is an amending motion. So on the amendment, I'll call the question. Well, okay, Councillor Ward.
Mr. Mayor, I'm maybe a little bit confused here, but my understanding from staff is that they are already preparing a report that addresses these things. So we're effectively making a motion, amended or otherwise, to ask them to do work that's already underway. And I feel that's a little redundant.
Yeah, that's what they.
Like, could we not just do that through a?
Please, Joshua, please. Just clarify that.
Just through the chair, if your wish is to have Cecil Blogg looked at through the matrix, it's already on the list.
That's what I thought. I was pretty sure. Yeah, I was pretty sure. He gave me a peekaboo at it. That's why I sort of know this. So there's some redundancy here, but I think the idea behind this, Councillor Jantzen, you wanted to take priority over everything else. And I think that was the idea behind this. Correct? Am I right? Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Jantzen. Just clarify that.
Trying to be concise. But it does read a little odd there that it looks like the report that Councillor Day suggested was specific to the Cecil Blogg Drive. She wanted the information. I agreed with that. It's not about addressing speed and traffic throughout Colwood, was my understanding. Am I correct, Councillor Day? Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Day.
Thank you. We have really gone right the way around the mulberry bush here, but I will just try to explain where my head was coming from. I saw the notice of motion. I understand the problem that exists on Cecil Blogg Drive. The motion was that we send staff out to do something right now. And I say, well, we need to do our actions by informing our public what we're going to do so they have an opportunity to weigh in. That there's public participation, and then we try to be open and transparent. So I wanted a report. However, in asking for that report, it's become clear that we already have this report in the works, which I had quite forgotten that we had the bigger report in the works to talk about the same issue in all areas of Colwood. And so through that process, I've come to the understanding that I don't really think it's, I don't want to rush this one ahead of that report coming forward. We have to consider it all equally. So at this point, I'm suggesting that if we're going to take action, we need to have a staff report so we understand what action is being taken. That report is already in the works. It's going to be here by Q2. I'm very happy to continue to advocate for more short-term solutions to try to address the problem in the meantime.
Councillor Jantzen.
Thank you, Worship. I'm getting lost in this, and it's my own motion, but I've heard a lot here, and a lot of it is movement in the right direction. And what I'm going to do at this time, based on input from staff, which I do appreciate, and from yourself, Your Worship, I believe what I'm going to do is I'd like to withdraw this motion at this time with the knowledge that I am going to be monitoring to see where this lands in the spectrum when it is reported back in Q2. And I do apologize for around and around, but I think how about I'm going to withdraw for now, and I'll reserve the right to bring it forward in the near future if we're not satisfied with the results that come forward. Thank you, Worship.
You were the seconder, okay. Yeah, he was the seconder of the original motion, correct? Okay, so we'll withdraw. Councillor Georgeson, go ahead, please.
Sorry, I just have a question. Was correspondence received on this issue? So just a perspective maybe is that for me, I find this very difficult to see that maybe there's a reason to speed this up when I don't know what the issues are. I mean, if there's no letter, no correspondence, no report, then like there's no information. So that's what I'm finding really difficult here. And I think that that's important to write in your concerns and then we would all know what it is, or for the motion, the person that brings the motion forward to provide that information. That would make it a little bit more easier tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, the motion has been withdrawn. I'm just going to end discussion on this and move forward. Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to 8.3. If I can get the CEO to introduce our next speaker, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have our Deputy Director of Finance, Kathleen McLennan, to take us through the grant and aid report that's in front of council for consideration.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm going to try not to reiterate parts of this that you see every year. So we're just reviewing the policy today and the program. So Council recognizes the value to the community of local service clubs and this program around grant and aids that we support annually. As I'm speaking as a member of staff. Accordingly, a grant and aid budget is set annually within core operations to establish support funding for these community organizations. And for the 2025 budget, we have a $46,900 set aside. The policy that we are reviewing was approved in 2019, and then there was a resolution in 2021 to eliminate the standing grants that we hear about. I don't know what to say, not regularly, but just as a reminder that we did remove that element from the program. So since then, council has expressed interest in revisiting some of the program. And specifically to that end, I looked at 8 categories, which I think covered all of council's concerns. And that was around, actually I compared it also, I should mention, across the CRD, with some sampling as well through the rest of the province, on the mainland, through Alberta, a couple in Ontario, just to get a feel for what is happening, because it is sort of a common problem, and it's not a problem, sorry, a common issue and challenge for municipalities to administer. So of those 8 categories, I think I'll just list them if that meets council's requirements, and then if there's anything you want to expand on, I can go through, because there is quite a few appendices that support these recommendations. So the first category was on eligible organizations, and what staff found was that most municipalities do allow community-based groups. So the challenge that we saw in our policy was that we specifically target registered charities and nonprofit organizations, although we do continue to see applications from more loosely organized groups, which we do approve. So it was just to maybe not discourage those from applying, and the program criteria would dictate whether they are eligible or not on adjudication. Similarly, I only found one other policy that excluded sports organizations, and in that policy it was just sports teams. So many did have restrictions around sports organizations in terms of travel or age or just dollar limits. So there is things that we can do. But for this recommendation, we are just recommending that we allow sports organizations and we allow the adjudication process to determine whether there is an award or not based on the eligibility criteria in place. The second thing that was reviewed was the application deadline. And there were a little bit all over the place, but ours was the earliest. And what I did learn through this review was that a lot of the reason why people are doing this early deadline is because these amounts are informing their budget process. So that's why they're gathering information early. This isn't really our practice anymore at the City of Colwood, because we have a fixed, it's not fixed, but it's pretty set, and then we increase it by 2% every year. So we don't really have a need to be early, and some organizations have expressed that is a little bit challenging for them to remember that Colwood is early. So we're suggesting December 31, which does align with more closely with those in the CRD, although they're kind of a little all over the place depending on preference. But December 31 is like December is popular in January, and then there's the stragglers around. So that was fairly common. And it would support us in our work. Maximum grant was also a concern, not a concern, but just an item of topic of interest. And I did have better notes on the maximum grant. A lot of places did not have a maximum grant, but because we were interested, and when I looked at and provided in the appendices, the like our spend over 10 years, $5,000 looked pretty reasonable. We don't have the, like the Arts Council in there and things like that, that were a bit higher. So, 7,000 was 7,000 and 7,500. But again, I looked at all the budgets associated with those higher amounts, and they were typically higher. Like we're talking City of Victoria and places that have the 10 and the 7. So 5,000 was, at, not in the CRD, but outside the CRD. And it did look reasonable if you looked at our charts. Again, these are just recommendations based on the experience that, that I documented. Maximum consecutive grants. So this was another topic. Everyone's a little bit all over the place, to be honest. There were not a lot of maximum consecutive grants, but some went like only 1 year, to be honest, but that was a smaller, very small budget. And then 3 years, one was 4 years, and then some were 8 years and one were 5. So I'm based on council's feedback that we want to encourage, and in our policy as well, we want to encourage organizations to not depend on the funding. That was the reason why we removed also the standing grants. So this maximum would encourage organizations to not be so dependent. The wrinkle around the maximum grants is that we do have organizations that we support annually. Council, of course, has the authority to override, and that would still require 4 out of 7 councillors to support. And just when I'm look back to what I'm talking about specifically, if I can mention, is just like the RCL Remembrance Day and things like that, that council supports every year. So we could still set a maximum, and then it would be council's prerogative to, well, you don't have to support these tonight. We'll talk about those, I'm sure, but council still has that option. The 5th item that I looked at was the application content, and just trying to see what everyone else is doing and maybe what we're missing, and maybe opportunities for us to more align the application with our mandate, or not mandate, but objectives. So there were a couple of recommendations here, which include including a section in the application now, so that applicants will need to target sort of what is their, how is their request going to align with council's strategic objectives, and also to include a section that demonstrates commitment to inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility, which is becoming more and more important and prevalent, and would demonstrate sort of inclusivity and, well, all these 4 things that I just mentioned. Under program categories, this was pretty common, more so with established programs and larger budgets. So there was a lot of, we can set different categories so that we can have different criteria and different limits under these different umbrellas. And one of those was also this concept of micro grants, which are smaller envelopes of money, not envelopes, but like a range. And that seemed feasible, but it felt like more of a bigger review of this program than was necessary for this review, and was thought that probably public consultation would be a better way to gather that kind of information on what do people want to see, what maybe is missing, and how can we inform that part of our program. Adjudication was a popular topic with council, and we are not making a recommendation today that we change the way we currently adjudicate. Several options were reviewed. It's all over the board again. Some councils do have a committee of the whole still with people presenting. Some are doing the way we are doing. There's a kind of a mix of everything, and council was supportive of the process at the last meeting. And I did list some of the pros and cons of those options in the appendix, which include, of course, just experience, and the amount of time to get to the decision is no different than if council is meeting directly, things like that, and the bias and experience of if we had a committee of council and public, for example. And then finally, off-cycle applications. So it did show that most not most, but almost all, most of that's the same thing. They are allowing off-cycle applications, and in fact, some of them provide for it right at the beginning of the program, because they recognize the value that sort of things that are happening during the year or just starting up during the year could benefit the community, and they didn't want to disallow that again. So we are recommending that we continue to allow off-cycle applications.
And so I think that is the gist of it. And if I'm happy to answer any questions.
That's great. Thank you, Kathy. I know you did a lot of homework in this. I'm not saying necessarily agree with it all, but the homework was really well done. And thank you very much for that context of that. So I think the best way that I'll let each of the council ask questions on this. And we'll just tackle the issues that you didn't like. I think that maybe that's the best way to do this. I've got a whole laundry list here, so I'll go last. Anyways, we'll start with Councillor Day. Councillor Day.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. I know it's not an easy thing to do. There's lots of investment in the community in many of these grants, some of them very long-standing. So I appreciate the very wide lens that you used to reach out to gather the information for us. And I really think that changing the deadline to December 31st or a date in January would be very beneficial to the applicants, if that's within the realm of achievability for staff, because some organizations have spoken to me this year and they have reached out to the city to inquire about the grant process and never received an answer. So some applications have not been made this year simply because they didn't hear back from staff. So that worries me because I know we were, reviewing this, and I think it's unfortunate if we aren't able to look at applications that may be worthy, just because they didn't get a response. The limitations to grant funding that are contemplated for the not more than 5 years of grants in a row may lead to a larger number of long-term funding requests, because that's my observation over my time on council has been the things that started as a grant in aid, including PCFSA, which started with a permissive land tax exemption, eventually morphed into a fee for service in order to make it not have to compete with other organizations. And then, so I looked at your report from that perspective with the recommended changes. The following 8 organizations that have had more than 5 years or more of grants would not be eligible: Big Brothers Big Sisters, Greater Victoria Volunteer Society, QChat Support Association, Royal Canadian Legion, Senior Secondary Schools Dry Grads, Stigma Free Society, Vancouver Island South Film and Media Commission, and the Open Gate Church. So I think some of those might be able to transition to a fee for service type arrangement, but not all of them would suit that arrangement. Like Pacific Center makes a lot of sense because they're providing a service to residents in Colwood that we can identify as a service, whereas, some of those other ones were a very small part, contributing to some important work. Expanding to include sport organizations will also increase the number of requests. And so I had to think about this one a lot. I tried to put a different hat on to think about that. And despite being a nonprofit society, some of these organizations charge fees for participation. And while they are valuable, they're not equal, at least in my opinion, to some life-saving connections like Big Brothers or Big Sisters, the crisis line support. And when we start to argue about, maybe some other level of government should be providing the funding for something, that doesn't really help when those programs are actually saving lives, when we're talking about the crisis line or suicide intervention. And maybe, that's not worth that splitting of hairs. I would support providing funding to a nonprofit group that provided access to individuals otherwise unable to join. But there are some organizations that do work like that through Jumpstart, which I think is associated with Canadian Tire, but we'd need to look at that further. And I'm hoping that we would be supporting organizations that are doing good work in Colwood and supporting our goals of an inclusive and engaged community for all of us, and preserving links between seniors and youth or health issues. They could be limited by some of the changes in the policy. We're trying to get a global view of the programs and services in Colwood, with the aim of providing stable funding so that what's here today will still be here tomorrow, because it gets really difficult. I tried for a while to maintain um, a listing of services for youth in the Greater Victoria region, and it's impossible because that's funded by other levels of government. Those programs come and those programs disappear, and then nobody tells you when they go away, and nobody tells you when they show up. So I think that it's just really important that we're trying to maintain the agencies that are here in Colwood that are providing services through unpaid volunteer labor. Those are the organizations that I really feel we should be putting our emphasis on. And I'll just leave it at that. But I do think it was a really great report. And I really hope that we can find a way to slice and dice it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I think I forgot what I was gonna say. Yeah, for all that, Councillor Day. But I did really appreciate the report, and this is actually a process that I actually enjoy doing. It's a bit tedious, but I like doing this. I was happy to see that we expanded the eligibility requirements to include grassroots organizations, groups. I've always kind of struggled with this being the grant and aid, whether we should be funding projects versus programs, right? And so we talked about this before, and I saw some of these changes come back. For me, I feel like the grant and aid is intended to, bring some of these grassroots organizations off the ground to start something new and not to be funded consistently through this grant and aid. But I was happy to see the maximum grant of 5,000. I think that was something that I had mentioned in previous meeting. I do think it does give more opportunity for more groups to come forward looking for some assistance. I do struggle with some, and I had conversation with Councillor Jantzen too, is just like, limiting the consecutive years for which one can receive the grant. You look at groups like, Big Brothers and Greater Victoria Volunteer Society. There's so many great groups out there that need the funding. So I struggle a little bit with that internally, but I was really happy to see the red line version and a lot of the changes that were made that had been discussed previously. And I thank you for your work on this. And I'll let some of the other councillors have their say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jordison.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Kathy. I really appreciate the report. This is a lot of work, and so hats off to you for pulling that all together. I just had some questions about, I think we're up to about 40,000. I don't know what number we're at for like the cost, like the budget for this each year. Is it around 40?
Yeah, through the mayor, we're at 46.9 this year for 25.
And how do we arrive at that number?
Well, every year it goes up by 2%, and so it basically goes up with almost everything goes up by 2%. So that's our current model. So some municipalities have a different model in setting their grant and aid budget, and then this purpose of this report was not to really investigate budget so much as our program, but a budget is obviously something I think I mentioned that council may be interested in exploring in a future exercise.
Yeah. Okay. I guess I just think that this is a modest financial support that's supposed to be offered by the city. It's not, this isn't the bank of the city. And I understand that, and you know, there are very many worthwhile programs and services out there that need the assistance. But like any other grants that are offered throughout the federal government, they're not a guarantee. They're not every year. They're one-offs, and a lot of programs and a lot of services that are offered, they spend almost half a year filling out just grant and aid requests. Like they can do that like almost half of a year to try to get money for things. So and you know, I see there's a lot of things that we don't support, like CFAX Anonymous. We don't support Coats for Kids. I mean, like, where does it end? Um, and I'm just thinking out loud that maybe that this is too much of like, this is a citizens, taxpayers' money. And I just think that maybe this budget it could be halved. And I honestly think that everybody should be getting the same amount across the board. It's $1,000. Take it or leave it. I mean, I don't, it's very difficult to explain to one person, we gave you $4,000 because, I don't know, it looked good this year. We gave you $2,000 because like there's no rhyme or reason how to explain how we decide the monetary amounts. So if it was the same across the board. Also, I think it's important that we prioritize services within Colwood. And this whole coming back and back, like it should be, maybe it should be for seed funding or new programs and helping them out. They should be running for a year before we even offer that grant to them. And then they get support for a year and then they come back for maybe a second time and that's it. And we move on. There's lots of groups that need support and we can't keep funding the same ones. And every year what they're asking for goes up. It's not the same. It's, you know, they're always wanting more. I'm just trying to think what else I had here. Yeah, I'm just finding that this is kind of out of hand in my view, and I just think that it just needs to be dialed back a bit, and I think it needs to be a little bit simpler with the costs that we're giving out to everybody. Thanks.
Councillor Jantzen?
Thank you, Worship. I will say that of all the subjects in the 6 years or so the mayor and I have been here at the table, we've spent more time talking about this less than $50,000 budget. And we've spoken less on multi-million-dollar projects. So I find it interesting that seems like each year we spend an inordinate amount of time discussing this, but here I go. Here's my list anyhow. There's some language in there about help me out, Kathy. You're precluded from applying if you've gotten support from any other level of government. Is that the proposal?
That is sort of one of our criteria where if there's another level of government funding you, that you would not be eligible for grant and aid. That's a common.
I think that's a challenge because a lot of these organizations are really needy and really worthy. So they are making multiple applications. So I'm not sure how I feel whether, I mean, that wouldn't change my mind for an organization. That would show me that they're maximizing their opportunity with other sources of funding as well, not just us. So I maybe see that a little bit differently.
I feel like I was sort of waiting till everyone was done to answer. So I'm kind of in a weird space here now. The intent of that language is which is also a weird space that we're in right now, but it's to preclude things like health services that we aren't typically providing. So it's things specifically earmarked and funded, not a grant, but like programs that are funded federally or funded through a different level of government.
Okay, by simply seeking a grant from another community or from the province doesn't preclude you? Okay,
Correct.
thank you. I prefer your interpretation as opposed to the way I interpreted it. Thank you. The sports organizations, tough one for me. There's lots of opportunity for sports out there. And there's lots of grant pathways, and I wrote some of them myself, you know, for my kids' teams. I think there's other opportunities. I view this as completely different than sports, and you know, we mentioned a lot of the worthy organizations here. I'd be less inclined to go in that direction. I'm more inclined to support some others on the list before I supported a sports organization. I think they have other options. And also again, as was mentioned, as a former member of the armed forces, I'd have a tough time telling the Legion no, because this is year 6. I'm sorry. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know if I can get myself there. So, you know, and again, and if we say, okay, the Legion's fine, but not these other ones, well, then I have a problem with that too. So I think we just kind of back ourselves into a bit of a corner with that. And I think really it can just be up to us. Give us our spreadsheet. We'll fill it out, send it back for the $50,000 that we're going to spend, which is 0.00001 of our budget. You know, and then we'll let the chips fall where they might at the will of council. Thank you. And I guess you know, what's your hope if we're going to nickel and dime this a little bit with some bits and bobs? Do you want specific feedback on that, or do you want to take it away and come back? Or
No, I do, sorry, through the mayor, I do appreciate, I thought that we had time tonight actually to go through exactly the things that you guys are raising. Because, and then if we can't amend it, the policy tonight on the fly, then we will come back. I had an alternate timeline so that next the first possible meeting to come back, I'll come back with those edits.
Do you have enough from council in the way of themes then, or do you want specific direction on some of the stuff that we've discussed today?
I believe at this point I will need specific directions, such as it sounds like there's a theme of we want to continue to not allow sports organizations. We're going to allow the community, like that kind of thing, if council could agree as a group on what direction we're taking that way.
Okay.
Would it be okay if I speak to the questions that have been raised so far?
Yeah.
I was gonna make
go
my
ahead,
comments
Mr. Mayor.
first, and Council Ward and Council Grove.
I'll
and then
yield.
me, and then we'll go to you, because I was wondering if that's what we wanted to do. Okay, thank you. Council Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, sorry, I just don't think we're at a place where we can say, okay, council is prepared to give clear direction at this point. I certainly disagree. I would rather see money go to a fledgling youth sports organization, for example, than to a church. So I have an issue with that, as I've said before, and we can laugh about it, but we don't have a mandate from this community to fund an organization that, you know, is specific to one interest group, right? And I do that as a more extreme example, but the same thing is there. I'm looking, and there's a wide variety of organizations here. I tend to think, as Councillor Olson had said, that my impression of the program was that this is kind of seed money to get something started, and then they find their way. What I'm looking at here is that there's a lot of organizations that essentially this has become a line item in their budget, right? You know, the Legion's a great example. Now, I support the Legion, and I would be hard pressed to find a way to deliver that message too. But, you know, I think at this point they've accepted that, well, we get $4,000 from Colwood every year. The Victoria Volunteer Society, the same thing. It's $1,000 line item in their budget, which is just an expectation now, year to year to year. So I wonder about the program, and I go back to the actual description that is at the beginning, the purpose. This is council believes it does not have a mandate to spend taxpayers' dollars on charitable organizations or objectives. You know, that's the first line there. So we don't have a mandate. Why do we then have a but after that? And we start talking about spending money on all sorts of different things. I would actually pose the question if this program, this grant and aid program, should continue in its current format at all. If instead we should look at specific groups. So for example, the Legion, much as if you were going to sponsor an event, you would be a title sponsor or a silver sponsor, whatever it might be. Well, with the Legion, with their annual event, we put it in our budget as a line item that every year we donate X amount to be a sponsor of the breakfast that they do on Remembrance Day. And if council determines that Greater Victoria Volunteer Society is, you know, something we want in our budget as a line item, then we add that in there. But I think we do away with this piecemeal ad hoc, no really clear criteria that's divisive and without a mandate, because I don't know if we can agree. Now, I'm happy to lose a vote on something, but I think I'm representative of the community, that there'll be a small cross-section of people that go, why are you giving my tax dollars to that group? And other people going, well, geez, this group's really needs it. How do you tell the girls soccer team that couldn't raise enough money to go to the one tournament they've ever qualified for that, hey, you're not as worthy as this group from outside Colwood that comes every year and we give money to? So I'll be honest with you, I just, it's a small amount, but what if it wasn't? What if we were at a larger city and it was $1 million a year? Does that change the philosophy? And I don't think it does. I think it's piecemeal, it's well-intentioned, but there's no mandate behind it. So that's my take on it. I don't support it at all, and I won't support any change, and I won't go for it.
Thank you. Councillor Grove?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I could say that Councillor Ward's comments sort of stepped me back a bit too, because I'm struggling a little bit with the sort of the beginnings of this whole program, and I think I understand the intent behind it, and I know some groups have benefited and depend heavily upon it. I don't know that a sports team quite sits in the same realm. When you think about a tournament or some such, there are a large body of people. They do their bottle drives. I've lived through a few of those myself. Sports fields are provided. There's a big capital investment, which sports teams benefit from, whether they're a startup team or whether they're a plus 40 team. So I don't support the notion of the sports teams getting support. As far as the churches go, I know that some of them have strong community programming that is beneficial. And I think that the programming element of the outline is important to maintain as opposed to one-off events. Yeah, so sorry, I had some notes here and I sort of lost track of them. The off-cycle, or sorry, the limit of $5,000 could be, I think, lowered to maybe $3,000, just to keep it a little bit more modest. I think that the 3-year limit is, or 5-year limit in terms of repeating, is not a bad idea. Maybe it could be shorter, because I think that the groups should be encouraged, first of all, to find other funding, but also that they are encouraged to develop a line item request and process through City Hall. We have these groups coming to the city now, and they are, when you look at their amounts, the green team gets the 30,000 from us this year, I believe it is. And, you know, it's a significant amount. We can see the justification of the dollars spent because it's leveraged up. And the greater value is a benefit to the community. There's many small groups, I think, or sorry, under purpose, I think you had mentioned, sorry, that the council's objective of enhancing the quality of life, economic, social, or cultural. I think that we need to have environmental term included in that list. It grabs a few groups that are already involved. But anyway, I generally support this. I do not support the idea of supporting sports teams. I'd like to stay with the existing definition of qualifications. Otherwise, I generally support it, whether we go to a limit of 3,000 or 5,000, whether we, the 2% increase per year barely covers inflation. That could maybe go to, you know, like a CPI, like a lot of stuff does in terms of including. And so I think that the program should continue unless we do have that in some form, the conversation around the integrity or the purpose of the overall program. But I don't think that that's what we're deciding tonight. So, I don't know, there wasn't much in that, but so be it. Thanks very much for the report.
Thanks. I'll just throw my comments in before I let you go second here, Cynthia. I just, you know, I think we don't even meet our own requirements because, you know, in accordance with the old policy, it says you have to be a nonprofit society, and we have not upheld that. I was kind of disappointed last year when I used that criteria, and then yet, you know, under our rules, the majority, 4 out of the 7 would give money, and then, you know, I didn't say a thing. I just kept mum about it. I guess because I've never I don't like this program, period. But I understand why we have to have it. You know, it's this discretionary thing. I just hate discretionary spending, right? It just gets me. It really does, you know, because who are we to spend taxpayer dollars on our pet projects? But I understand these are more than pet projects. Some of them are just a necessity, and I understand that. And I was hoping that at one time we would agree to what sort of charities we'll support every year, because we're part of the greater community. That's how I see this. And, you know, you're suspiciously absent if you don't contribute, right? It, you know, for example, right now, even to the Indigenous Day, you know, we do this $5,000 every year, and then, you know, I mean, it's published who's paying what. So you're sort of this sort of a moral, social, community obligation to do this. So I understand that, but you know, we haven't sort of got that list of, and so those ones I don't mind so much. It's the ones that really bother me is in the past, I know that some of the money that we gave away was used to pay for marketing promotional materials by some groups. I didn't know it because I was told that that's what they did with our money. I have all kinds of problems with that, to tell you the truth. It just really bugs me. So, you know, I've always been of the philosophy, you can't use this for continuing operations. Like that, this is nuts that we do this. You know, we're not there to use taxpayer dollars for this purpose. I just have a hard time with that. You know, because there are some true volunteers, you know, in the community that volunteer all the time, and they want a little money to do a special project to make the community better. It's community building. I'm a big fan of that. And maybe that's the criteria, you know, you got to show that, you know, that first of all, you're doing something that's going to build our community, because it is Colwood taxpayer dollars. The second thing is that in some way it supports our strategic priorities. I think that's another criteria. And as far as the timing goes, how many years, I'm not so fixated on, you know, what it is, but you know, the model ones that I was told that were really good. See, I looked into this, Kathy, when I was a councillor here, and I brought what I was told were some of the best by the auditors. And so I brought one in, and it was no more than, the ones that I brought were no more than 2 years, no more than 3 years, the two that I brought in. But then the separate ones were the places where you just purely donating to, that they were continuous. But to have that list in an agreement amongst council that, you know, this is what we should support, you know, whatever it may be. Can I get I also need a definition. I didn't understand microgrants. Is that less than $1,000, or what is that?
Thank you, Your Worship. Microgrants could be anything we determine it to be. So it's generally, because there's a whole bunch of examples of it throughout the province and Canada. It's just a category that council would choose that could be for the dry grads, for example, where we're going to approve those. We could say this is going to be $5 a grad or whatever it is. It can be sort of require less adjudication. It can be grants between 500. We can set limits for different program categories. So that's what the microgrant is, so that the concept is there's less adjudication required, or that staff can adjudicate and it doesn't have to come to council.
Thank you. And so there's only two more points I want to make. It's the other one I just cannot get my head around, because I think we're opening a Pandora's box, and that's sports teams. We have so many deserving sports teams and sports organizations. And if we do that, we're opening a Pandora's box. Remember, once you give it out, it's so hard to take it away. And I'm really afraid of that one right now. And so I just want to make that comment. That's my own personal feeling on this. It's, we can't have a bunch of seniors that they're not up, and they don't have the legs to go around doing bottle drives and things like that. And the youngsters are. I'm not saying I don't personally contribute to the sports organizations, which I do. But lastly, you know, for the amount of money, I'm sort of the opinion, I don't know, someone said it, how much time we spend on this and for the amount of money, you know, we spend more time as I think it was Councillor Jantzen said, we spend more time on this than we do on making $1 million decisions. So it's interesting. But the last thing I'd really like to say is that I think last year was a precedent setting. I liked what we did with the setting aside, you know, whatever. We didn't actually, you know, we actually did something really phenomenal. We came in under a budget and we left the rest of it for off-cycle applicants. And, you know, I think we should just make that a rule of thumb. Let's just set aside 10%, say, I'm just using a number, you know, $4,600, $900 away for off-cycle, because we do get a number of them and worthy. So I think that maybe, yeah, we should just make our budget less than the off cycle. Just make put a number and just sort of say, here is the real budget that we want to work towards. Other than that, I mean, everything else I can live with. It was just these issues that really bothered me a lot. And, you know, and I just don't know if I certainly wouldn't give a thumbs up to the policy as written, but those were the key ones that I can't live with those. I just can't live with those. Anyways, I will let people speak for the second time here. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I just wanted to add, in your background, you said that council recognizes the value of the community, local service clubs, groups, nonprofits, and charitable organizations in their efforts to promote the city or meet our strategic objectives and align with our OCP, which I think is really true. And what I like about Colwood's grants is that they are available to any organization in the community, with the exception of the sports groups, which we've mentioned. And what I like is that when they come to present their project, it helps to amplify what they're doing by coming to council. They're more well known in the community for what they're trying to do. And I think that is of real value, and you know, we'll debate around the table and come up with a plan. But it's really important for that feeling that this city hall is a good place to come to get support and find a way to bring something forward that makes the community more of a community. When I first moved to Colwood, you didn't know your neighbors. There weren't events to go to, and we have come a long way. So, I mean, we're trying to create as level a playing field as we can. We're trying to refine it to make sure it doesn't take so much time. But the work and the community benefit that's grown out of these grants, I think, is quite large. One of the things that other committees that I've been on have done, who have been offering grants, is to ask those people to come back and present to council with their outcomes. And I think that would actually be a beneficial thing for Colwood to hear back from people. How did it go? How was your budget? It allows for an element of accountability, that they should be putting forward a budget, telling you what they're going to use the money for, using the money for the thing that they said they were going to do, and then tell you how it went and what they learned from it, because it's all part of the community growing and new ideas come out of that for other organizations to put on similar events as well. So I think it's a good way to leverage a small amount of money for community good and education.
Thank you. Councillor Jordison.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I just wanted to maybe suggest that people look at the District of Central Saanach's grant and aid policy. That one, it's very clear. There's one monetary number used throughout it. it specifies no off-cycle requests. I mean, if you're if you're going to university and you're applying for a grant, you have a specific timeline to get the grant in, or you wait to the next year. Like it just has to, there has to be some more policy around this. And I just feel like at the end of the day, it's fine to say that we can pick whatever number to give to people, but it's hard to explain it to the public. And that's why I'm having a difficult time with this, because there's no structure around the way it is in deciding what number to give to somebody over another group. So I'm just having a real difficult time with this whole process. And yeah, it's a little bit of money, but it's not our money. Thank you.
Councillor Ward?
Yeah, I think I'm still struggling with it a little bit. I think in determining what the purpose of it is, and I agree. I believe there is value, as Councillor Olson and Councillor Day mentioned, in launching new initiatives, you know, when Colwood residents come forward and have, you know, a new society or something that will benefit the community. They need that kickstart. I think there should be a small finite amount of money available for a very set period to help them. They report back on their progress, but then like any business, they need to kind of go find their way and you know, and become sustainable in a different way. And then I believe that the line item, you know, the budget line item ones, things like the Legion, and you use the example of the, you know, the Indigenous event that happens every year. And I think that's very important that we're at that table, you know, that we're contributing. There is a moral obligation, as you said, Mr. Mayor, but I think that, you know, that's not in grant and aid. So why is the Legion in grant and aid? If we view the Legion as something that we should do annually and contribute, we should move that over to an appropriate spot in the budget and vote on it every year and include it in there. And then they have cost certainty. They don't have to come cap in hand every year because we include it in there, or we can put it in a 5-year financial plan, for example. I think we need to separate out, you know, those type of things from what this program is, and then really shrink this program down to a seed money, a starter. The other piece I look at is some of these groups, we say, well, these sports teams, I heard the example, they have things, they have the ability to raise funds. Well, Big Brothers Big Sisters, with all due respect, is a massive charity. Their fundraising arm is significant. They have more administrators than City Hall here. So, you know, how do you compare giving them $2,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 to the little startup, right? So I feel there's a real range here, and I think we need to separate this out, is where I'm going. We need to have our annual charitable donations to organizations we democratically vote to support for, and then we have a small startup seed money fund for little community groups that are a one-off, and that's it. And at a small level, like Central Sandwich is doing, at $1,000, $2,000, I don't think we need to spend 5,000, 10,000, or spend more than that for an organization to spend it all in glossy marketing to try to get bigger. So that's where I'm at on it. I do think, Kathy, that the work done on this was great. I love the, you know, the historical awards. It lets you see bigger picture, because we're making these decisions in isolation every year with a list in front of you. And, you know, to be able to see the history and where it's going, and how many of these groups are kind of coming cap in hand when they really need it, versus groups that are just, hey, this is our annual budget parade that we do, like the library and everybody else. So, you know, it's very helpful. So thank you for the work you did on this.
Okay, it looks like all the questions and comments have been made.
Okay, my
So-
turn, yay. Through the mayor. I'm gonna try to go from the list that I gathered from the top of this game. So I was disappointed to hear, sorry, Councillor Day, that some people said they had no responses. We did have a new mailbox this year. And even in the last year, there were still emails going to M. Bovin. So I did respond. I even checked just last week to make sure everybody that was in that mailbox was responded to, but it is obviously possible that someone got missed, and hopefully we catch them all anyway. Once we do our intake, we reach out to everyone, but we would potentially miss a new applicant. That's fair. When we talk about the fee for service and the big brothers and sisters, and I wrote that down as well, Councillor Ward, because some of the programs say your staff, you have to be 100% staffed by volunteers. So there's all kinds of criteria and all kinds of things that we can get into. So for the purpose of this sort of like initial policy review, I
I thought those were the kind of things that we would probably want public consultation on, just being subjectively objective, like I have the ease of being, I don't have to be on your side making the decisions. I just can present the information as simple as I see it. But there was a way, there were some that had like a tier 1 and a tier 2 bracket, where tier 1 would be the kinds of organizations you're talking about that are recurring in nature. I don't believe we would want to make those a fee for service contract arrangement, because those come with obligations. That's a contract where they are delivering services to the city, versus grant and aid, which is under legislation. We have to run this program. That's why everybody runs it. I believe I made a reference to the legislation in the appendices where I was talking about the reasons. I think it's section 273, but I could be wrong. But so we have options in how we disperse the money, but not that we just abandon the program. And this, having tier 1 could be, these are the organizations council chooses to support annually. And tier 2 is just the bucket of money left for those that come after. Because a grant and aid is a little more like a grant. They use the money in the way that they've proposed to council, and then it might be directly to residents, not to the city at all, but for the city ultimately. The other organizations bucket is also intended to capture all these little school organizations that we see, like the micro grants that we talked about. I talked about unpaid volunteer. Oh, and then Councillor Jordison through the mayor, when we try to explain why we gave some money to some and not to others, I don't disagree. Our current adjudication process probably makes that a little more murky. There are ways that we can introduce very specific criteria and categories. I feel again like that is a bigger review though that involves public consultation, but again, up to council's direction, where we would say it would be way more obvious why organizations are getting money. There's weighted criteria. These are the criteria we've established. It gets 30% of your grade, if you will. So there are a lot of options we can do on a deeper dive. And then just to the mayor, when you were talking about building our community, that is indeed a category that some municipalities do use to actually brand their grant and aid program. There's building community grants, and that's just one category that many of them have used. And the way we do our weighted average adjudication, that almost by default sets aside a little piece of funding for off cycles, because we will never get to 100% that way. So there is by default sort of a little piece of the envelope left for them. I think I answered everything.
And just to give you some historical context, I know Councillor Day and Councillor Jantzen were around. I mean, that budget actually, it used to be a lot less when we were on council, was councillors. And so not just the 2% inflation, we just got crazy. We just got bat crazy, as I call it. And we were not ever under, we were always over. And that's how that built up like this. I believe the first time I sat there, I think the grant and aid was about, well, you can help me with this, Jan, around in the 30s, I think mid 30s, 35,000. Well, yeah, that's way before my time, but I think when I was a councillor, it was between 30 and 35,000, and it just exploded. That's more than 2% per year, I think. Yeah, so I do have some historical context on that one. So like I said, that's where that number came from in the end. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think that's relevant. Like I did obviously gather the budgets from all of these municipalities, but it seems to me it becomes almost irrelevant, because council, even as we've witnessed tonight, there's specific objectives that each member of council brings to the table, and it's different from all the objectives there. So some municipalities have large budgets, much larger than ours, more than double for maybe even a smaller population. So it's really, I can provide that information. I'm not sure that it will be meaningful.
No, not to me. We don't always do everything everybody else does.
No, exactly. So I'm not sure, maybe it feels like council is
hesitant on how to proceed, and maybe you would like me to come back with some, if you provide me with a little direction, I can come back with something.
So I'd maybe like to start. This is what I've heard. So there is, of course, the fee for service one. So that's that tier. We know that one and don't really want to touch it. I mean, we're getting, I believe we're getting great value for that. I think the only thing that's missing on that policy is that I believe at the end of the year, they should tell us how they actually spent it. Like, because sometimes there is pretty significant dollar values. So that's one tier. So then another one is just getting an agreement with council on how much of that pot of money, that $46,900 or whatever that was, 46,900, yeah. And just deciding how much of that is, well, let's set aside so much for donations, you know, whatever it may be. We've got to get an agreement on that. There's varying opinions, as you could see across the table here, but let's set aside that. And so that's that. And then I think as Councillor Ward has said, I like the idea because that's what I thought the original intent of this was. It was sort of to provide that seed money for that nonprofit organization. This is the intent of the Central Saanich one anyways. And
I just want to understand what you mean by donation.
well, the standard things that we do, for example, every year, we give money to wounded warriors, or we give money to Sarah Beckett Memorial Run. It's just because we're part of the community, right? Food bank, no, I don't know, we don't do food bank, not money, cash dollars. We don't give the CFAC Santa Anonymous. That was surprising that we didn't do that. I just looked at all the communities, and of the 13 communities, I think we were, us and one other place, one of the electoral districts were the only ones that didn't. Now we're conspicuously absent again, but you know, whatever it may be, $500 is great. I mean, they'll be elated, but it's just, that's what I mean by that, like established, you know, I use the analogy, it's not every nonprofit organization is great. You know, because I used to be one of the biggest contributors to the Cancer Society until I found out the CEO made $500,000 a year. That's not going to happen anymore. But you know what I mean? So it's, and that's why I look at some of the organizations that we have throughout the city. They're, you know, the Scenic runs without anyone paid. They're all volunteers. They've never asked us for a penny either, on the other hand. They're self-funding, basically. You know, we have this Cindy Moyer group. Yeah, Reimagine. We gave money to them for the first time with some seed money, but again, the volunteers, you know, and they had it, they wanted to pay for specific things, you know what I mean? That was really identifiable. But we have those groups right now. I have no issue helping them, you know, launch and get launched. And I thought that was more or less the intent of this. But now it's like, wow, everybody, you know, it's, and I agree, you know, Big Brothers and Big Sisters is one that I go, wow, that's a pretty big organization. And what we provide them is just, I'm sure it's peanuts in the big picture. Oh, yeah. Yes.
I just, I feel like we were looking to get a motion going, to get a list together, and I feel like none of us are quite ready, and I feel like we already have another meeting still tonight to get through. So I'd just like to suggest that we table this and come back with better information for Candace, or let her come back with what she makes of our discussion so far tonight, because I just don't feel like we've got the chops tonight to give her what she needs to be specific.
Yeah, well, that's what I was trying to get to. I was trying to give her some specific guidance here, because I'm just hearing what I've heard so far. But it looks like you just have to categorize some of these things, and you know, and then everything else you heard, and just maybe come back with something. Is that enough? is it more guidance than you had before you came in here? If you walk out a better person, then yeah, I've accomplished what I think you wanted to accomplish. But
I can, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can take another stab at it based on the feedback tonight and bring that back. And maybe when it first gets circulated, if you notice something right away that feels off, but it's again, that's individually, but we'll see you at the next available meeting.
Jen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So council has given staff direction that you would like to see a review of the grant and aid policy and the program that the city administers in accordance with that policy. Staff have done a comprehensive review that is before you tonight, and I can appreciate that it's a fair bit of information. You've heard from Kathy, the number of policies that we've reviewed, the programs we've reviewed. What I would encourage council is we have lifted up a number of recommendations for considerations. We have categorized those recommendations. It would be difficult for staff to, at this point, make best guess on where council would like to see further efforts made. Page 2 of 7 of this staff report, the table highlights 8 categories where staff have made recommendations. It would be helpful to receive direction in any of these areas if council is in a position to do so. If not, I would suggest we would return with this same information unless council gives specific feedback tonight in any area for us to focus. However, without that feedback, we would simply return with this information at a future date. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Oh, please, Jason.
This is a hard thing to recommend to council because this is probably one of the most political things that you touch. And this isn't unusual for councils to struggle with what this looks like. I've seen some other options where council will strike a committee, that committee will come back with recommendations. Different communities look at this different ways. And I agree with our chief financial officer that some direction about coming back would be important. Having said that, you can also table it and we can bring it back at another time for another review based on what some of the information that you gave here, but it would be the same report without that direction at this point.
Okay. I'll just get some other thoughts here. Councillor Jordison, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Kathy, I think what is missing for me is what those like the fee for service, like what we're like a list of what we're putting money towards every year and who the people are, like maybe there's somewhere to find it, but like a list of all the donations that we are contributing to or want to contribute to. And then yeah, I mean, I guess just kind of like where all the money's going yearly. I'm not sure that we have that somewhere like all together, so we can kind of determine if there's tiers or something that we should be doing each year versus what's new. I don't know. Through the mayor, most of that content I would think would be built from the 10-year history of payments. So to determine the tiers, we would see the people that are being paid. That's a terrible phrasing. The organizations that are receiving funding under the program, every year. And if that was something that council supported, those could be grouped in tier 1. And someone made reference to the 8. I think that was you, Councillor Day. And then the rest we could include in a second tier that would be more subjective. But again, that is based on everyone on council aligning with that approach. Thank you.
Yeah, this is the appendix that did use. So when I made my points, that's why I disagreed with on this. That's all. But I don't know where everybody else was looking at, but that's what I was looking at. Councillor Day.
Thanks. I was just going to try to work through what I heard around the table. I would propose a couple of motions that would simplify it. I really do think it needs to come back because some of the things that we're talking about are not in this report. So the things that we've funded that sort of fly under the radar, like the Indigenous Day, like the Actually, I think Sarah Beckett Run is in here, but there are others that aren't in here that I
Well, the
heard.
Indigenous Day is in the budget now. So
It's in the budget, but it's not in this report.
No, so it's not grant and aid. So what I'm gonna suggest, I do think that we should table this and then have everyone look at appendix two. The recommendations and not recommended and I'd like everyone just to really focus on that to see what you agree with and disagree with it. That's the conversation I want to get focused on right here. That's what I basically did, and that's what my points were on this table. And I just sort of said, I don't agree with this, and this, but I assume we're all working from the same page here. But I don't think so. Yes.
Staff can bring this report back with the decision points, right? Decision point 1, 2, 3, and 4. It's already in page 2 of 7 of the report, but we can re-highlight that and bring that back if council chooses to table this for more discussion. That would be how I'd recommend council moves forward.
Is everybody comfortable with that? Can I get a motion then, please? Yes, please. Okay. Councilor Crowe, Councilor Day. Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion. Councilor. Yep. Jordison. Okay. We will move on. Can we just take a quick health break for 2-3 minutes? I'm looking after Councilor Olson. And we'll move on to bylaws. 9.1.
Yes.
Oh, yes, sorry, pardon me, 8.4. And that is over to Councillor Olson, if you want to motivate, please.
Oh, it is.
Over to you, Councillor Olson. I can read that.
I know, That's okay. I have it up in front of me as well. Mercy. Thank you. So this was actually a motion brought forward by both myself and Councillor Ward. And it was essentially, previous council had approved eliminating zoning that would allow car dealerships in Colwood. So we were just seeking to understand, has the zoning been completed? And if not, we'd like to see a proposed timeline for completion of the zoning elimination and an update on any applications that may be pending or currently in progress. So again, I think we were just looking for information, some follow-up on the approved eliminating of the zoning that would allow the car dealerships.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I get so you're moving the motion, seconder, Councillor Ward? Okay, we'll open it up for discussion if there's any comments by staff. Oh, Councillor Jantzen.
Thank you. And Councillor Olson and I have discussed this, as have Councillor Ward and I, and there's a bit of a history here, and I won't bore everyone with the details, but well, perhaps I will. In January 2022, I brought forward a motion, notice of motion, January 10th, 2022, and it was to limit the future development of surface parking lots focused on auto sales in Colwood. That then came to council on the January the 24th, 2022, which was seconded by Councillor Baxter and passed unanimously. And with the intention that we would move towards a report coming back, making some recommendations council with a view to removing car lot from our land use bylaw. And there was an example in May of 2022 where, for those of you who were here, a fellow business in Colwood that wanted to expand their car lot was made to come and seek a temporary use permit because the community was moving in the direction of inhibiting future car lots. And he was granted a TUP for 3 years at that point in time. And after that point, which is May the 16th, 2022, committee of the whole, I can't find anything else after that. So where I thought this was already done and dusted, I guess it's a little murky. And so I'm fully supportive of this member's motion, again, to close the loop on this once and for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ward?
Thank you. I just want to acknowledge that. And I think Councillor Jantzen, I've been as critical of the previous council as anybody. But to know that you put forward that motion and that it was adopted unanimously, I think is important information for the public. There's been a lot of questions around why a car dealership was allowed in Allendale, why car dealerships continue to flourish along Souk Road. And rarely do I want to look backwards anymore. It's about moving forwards and doing what we can for the city. But this is a case where something critical has fallen by the wayside potentially. I mean, we'll get a report, obviously, if we support this motion. But I would suggest that the will of the last council in voting unanimously is probably reflected by the will of everybody at this table, and that we do not want Colwood to be known as the used car center of the South Island. And for this to sort of just get missed potentially concerns me. I would want to understand how it slipped through the cracks and how we ended up specifically with that Ford dealership in Allendale. It's a blight on Colwood. We were trying to do away with the gateway and what that looks like. And you know, we've done a disservice to the community, all of us, by allowing it to happen when the will of the previous council was very clear in not permitting that. And I think we owe an explanation to the public, and then we need to move forward. And that's the second part of this motion, obviously, is to understand what else is out there and how do we mitigate that? How do we put a stop to that potentially if we can? So thank you, Councillor Jantzen, for bringing it forward initially and for, you know, helping bring it to light now. I think this is a pretty key issue, that one of the rare moments where I think 100% of the folks in Colwood, with the exception of maybe a used car dealer, is going to be behind dealing with this once and for all. So thank you.
Councillor Day and then Councillor Jantzen again.
Thanks. I just want to point out that I think actually the Ford dealership was approved before the motion. But it has long been on the calendar. I've watched as potential developments slowly turned into car dealerships many, many years ago. And my reasoning is not that I, don't like car dealerships, or it's really a dollars and cents reason. The tax dollars that we receive on a car dealership are far lower than the tax dollars that we would receive on a different commercial entity. So it's a simple dollars and cents matter. I don't want to be discriminating against those that are still present in Colwood, but I don't see that as our future. I see that as our past. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jantzen, second time.
Thank you, Worship. And I was only I'm gonna suggest an amendment. That amendment, if you can put it back up for just a second, please, Marcy. That amendment would be, I guess, a third item, and that we not issue any future business licenses to car dealerships or used car or what have you, until we've resolved this issue. So in other words, a bit of a pause or a moratorium on business licenses. And I would love some feedback from staff on how they feel about that, or whether they see an issue. But that would be my suggested amendment. Thank you.
Staff, Mr. Johnson.
We can certainly include that in the report, what that looks like in terms of a moratorium, how that would work, how we can put that together. And this is a priority piece of business, given this motion has been outstanding for quite some time, and been talking to staff about process improvements, to talk about outstanding motions and having a collection of those provided to council, so you can see what hasn't been actioned and why, and see when potentially it would be moving forward. So council's not wondering what else might be out there. We do have that as a process now. It just hasn't come to council, and that's one of the things that we need to make sure that you're comfortable with how we're moving ahead with the business. So things like this, you understand what the timing is and how it's coming forward. And this is apropos to making sure we're moving the business of council forward.
So, yeah, I'm just looking at that wording. I think the city not issue any future business licenses to new auto sales businesses. It's not a better way of putting that. Not that, I mean, once you buy a business license today, it's good for as long as you have that business, but it's just kind of confusing here. I just want to make it clear that it's to new auto sales businesses. Right. Then you had the other wording. Yeah. That's perfect. Okay, is that okay? And do I have a secondary to that amendment? Thank you very much, Councilor Ward. Discussion on the amendment. Councilor Ward.
Sorry, a split second too late, but I'm wondering, and a question maybe through the chair to the CAO, if we can, in this particular item, if we can establish a firm date for this to come back. I think you know, it's been hanging out there for 3 years. I think, you know, to expect something in a month or something reasonable would be something we should include here.
The intention would be this comes back to council in February, to not lose too much space with this. Once the information gets out to the community, there's going to be a real push to make sure that we're dealing with this. So this is a priority item and we'll bring it back to council in February.
And perhaps Councillor Jantzen, since I was the seconder, you'd be open to a friendly amendment to stay back to council in February 2025 for consideration. Thank you.
You were the seconder, so you're okay with it then, okay. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? Any opposed? Unanimous, motion carries. And on the original motion as amended, discussion? Seeing none, call the question. Any opposed? Seeing none, it passes unanimous. Thank you. Move on. Bylaws. And first on the agenda is Jen.
Thank you, Mayor Kobayashi. We were last in chambers December 16th, and that really concluded the scheduled budget deliberation meeting dates. At that meeting, council directed that staff return with the financial plan bylaw that encompassed the direction that we received throughout budget deliberations. That bylaw has been published, is before you tonight, and we are seeking 3 readings. I don't intend to give a presentation. I'm pleased to answer any questions council may have. Alternatively, if you wish for me to recap the approximate 4-month process that was undertaken, I'm happy to do so. I'll turn it over. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jantzen moves the motion. Seconder, Councillor Olson. Discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, passes unanimous. 9.2. If you could read it, Marcy.
Thank you. So we have sewer local area service enlargement amendment bylaws. Bylaw number 2050, the Colwood Main Sewer LAS enlargement for 3536 Wishart Road. And bylaw number 2051, Colwood South Sewer LAS enlargement for 3536 Wishart Road. And these are for adoption.
Right. Motion, please. Councillor Grove. Councillor Olson. Discussion? Seeing none, any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you. And now I'll just take a quick 1-minute recess and we're going to go in camera. Okay. Motion to close. Seconder, Grove. Any opposed? Seeing none. Thank you.